This is Changeling the podcast.
Welcome to Changeling the podcast, where everything is buy one get one half off, but the ones in question are always strange and unsettling. I am your host Puka, and I am joined by Fetch. Greetings, Fetch.
Greetings, I'll be your personal shopper for today.
Huzzah! So yes, shopping is sort of the watchword of the day because we are talking about Goblin Markets. Not just the thing themselves, but the book, the eponymous Goblin Markets. I'm quite excited to go into this one.
As you should be. It's an exciting book. It has only 49 pages by the PDF count, but there's a lot of very useful stuff in this, and just some fun stuff to read.
And 2 of those pages are covers even, so, Markets, I think, are one of my favorite spaces, both overall. Like, I have many anecdotes from my life that have taken place in market spaces, but then also to create for a game, whether Changeling or otherwise, which I think I've noted before. I like how they give you kind of carte blanche to introduce story hooks and weird little ideas, which this book kind of highlights as well. And they serve this liminal function, if I'm going to carry on using that word from the last couple episodes, between the familiar and the unknown, so you can figure out a way to drop them almost anywhere.
They're one of my favorite places in the setting, but I'll save that for when we're actually in the meat of it. Otherwise, we'll front load this.
For a bit of context, when this book came out, it was, I think, the first one that was not physically released in the line. Like, they had done a couple online adventures, but I don't believe this one ever had a print run. Because this was the end of 2009 when White Wolf was really starting to wind down production, shift more to online-only releases, and that was in the lead up to the publishing branch being closed entirely and Onyx Path taking up the torch. So it was weird times, but it doesn't mean they couldn't still put out a useful book. I remember downloading it fondly, but I did get the print on demand for this one because I wanted something physical. Anyway, how about this cover?
Oh my goodness. This cover is absolutely gorgeous. It's got a surprisingly cozy and inviting feel to it, despite the fact that there is an ogre-like person intimidating somebody in the background, and that the look from the person who's holding out what I think is some tasty food looks vaguely sinister at second glance. But all the colored glass and the warm lighting, it's as if this place was one thing on the surface and another thing when you look beneath it.
That one on the left, that's Jimmy Two Toes with his tray of freshly killed food. Yeah, it's very cozy and less dramatic than I sort of expected. It's kind of like with Grim Fears. If all the covers had been like this, I would have thought, wow, nice. But after the last two, it's a different vibe. I still like it, but I'm like, no, I liked the last two a little bit more. Anyway, on the back cover, we have an excerpt from Christina Rossetti's poem Goblin Market that I would imagine inspired the concept in Lost. I don't know if you are you familiar with the poem and how it kind of shocked the Victorians?
No, I was about to ask you whether you knew who Christina Rossetti is, because I do not.
So Christina Rossetti was a poet and writer in the Victorian era, one of the most preeminent pre-Raphaelites. And so a lot of the sort of, I guess what you would call classic fairy imagery derives from their circle, both artistically and in literature. And Goblin Market was, I think, one of her earlier poems, but it's like a long narrative epic. I mean, it's hundreds of lines. And it kind of tells the story of these two sisters who go to the Goblin Market, and one eats the fruit and one doesn't, and the one who eats the fruit suffers consequences. And so it's kind of like a little morality thing. But the language is very lush and very lurid at times, and people read a lot of kind of sexuality into it. Anyway, it's freely available online. I do recommend reading it because you kind of read that poem and you're like, oh, that's where they got 90% of this idea.
I had no idea. I'll keep that in mind.
Yeah. The blurb at the bottom of the back cover tells us that this book includes advice on constructing your own goblin markets, rules on buying and selling, sample characters, markets, and SAS market scenes to drop right into your Changeling Chronicle. And we'll have to, I guess, talk a little bit about what that SAS means when we get to chapter 3.
Sure will. Happy to say that I think this book delivers on all of these, even if I don't think every part is great. You'll have to listen to see which ones I like and don't like.
Well, let's start with the story, Bought and Broken, which I think we can say probably deserves a content warning.
Content warnings, above and beyond the usual Changeling stuff, involves harm to children.
Yeah.
So, as for what's happening here, this is about one of the lost who had been upset with his spouse, and rather than work through the issue, he came to the Goblin Market to try to trade her away and so he could trade up. Fucked up. He wound up with a fetch version of her who he had a child with and was still displeased with. He then killed the fetch, brought the child to the Goblin Market, and sold the child away to somebody in the market in exchange for some info to help him find his original wife. He is, at best, a horribly clarity lost kind of person, and at worst, just a monster.
Yeah. Along the way, through his journey in the market, he does pick up a gum that lets him chew the future, which seems to be this destiny-altering gum. And that's the kind of object which I kind of... I focused on that rather than the really, parts of the narrative here. But, yeah.
This short story has a lot of great turns of phrases. Cigarettes and
seafood!
Tells time, he says, chuckling. Tells time what to do. But lets you chew the future is my favorite.
I also kind of liked the Roachman hawks coffee that makes your footsteps silent. The pink monk stands bowed on the corner. Like, you could do Mad Libs for some of this and just have a ball creating the... Honestly, that kind of felt more valuable than the actual narrative here, just as a showcase of what a market is like.
I think they're both good for different reasons. The narrative is a great understanding of the general vibe of what the market is like, but I don't think it would be complete without having somebody use the Goblin Market to ruin themselves, and yet keeps coming back to it. The Goblin Market is still a part of the Hedge, and therefore an addictive element of Changeling's lives.
For sure. So after that, we get some credits. The authors for this were Jess Hartley, Alex Skokul, and Ethan Skemp. So as we get to the very brief introduction, we are told that every freehold knows of at least one, and that someone always needs something that you can only get at a Goblin Market, which I think pretty much sums it up. This to me is let your imagination run wild and justify it later. Stock that market with whatever you come up with and let your players just go to town.
Adding on to that, they have the second paragraph ends by saying that they are a source of undiluted wonder, quirky fantasy, and subtle dread, which to me is a reminder that you should have fun with these locations.
Mm-hmm. The theme is caveat emptor, let the buyer beware, and the mood is creepy anachronism, which I like.
Speaking of the theme, a place where plot hooks can be bought or sold is the most accurate description I've seen of Goblin Markets.
Yeah.
As for the mood, I never get tired of mixing the modern with the archaic with my own market.
Yeah, I think the key thing too, though, is with the creepiness, you want those pieces to not quite fit together correctly. Having things from one point in time and the world next to another, it's like they should feel a little bit disjointed.
Sure. For example, you could have a shop that looks like some old-timey tailors or haberdashery, then have the goblin merchant using a modern-day vacuum to clean up some mess on the floor.
Yeah, or have a yurt that reeks of frankincense with a back flap that opens into a 1970s casino with decaying linoleum overgrown with weeds.
Aw, yeah.
Why not? How to use this book. So, in Chapter 1, we'll get the basic elements and structure of the markets. Chapter 2 is where we'll get all of the crunchy bits, items for sale, merits, etc. And Chapter 3 will have some sample NPCs and scenes to drop into the Chronicle when people go visit the market.
Everything you could possibly want for a good story.
Yeah. Here we also have this sidebar on what the SAS is. So it's Storytelling Adventure System. And I think I'm just going to read what it says here, as this is a good summary. Think of an SAS product as a story kit, as if you'd bought a piece of modern furniture and brought it home in a big flat box. You open it up, eager to be the storyteller for your troupe, but what you find is a collection of pieces and parts, like the parts in Chapter 3. You'll use these parts and tools to build a story together with your friends. It might not look quite like you expect it to when it's all done, but as long as everyone enjoys it, it doesn't matter how you end up using all the pieces, or even if you throw some of them away. So, I hadn't exactly thought of this as an SAS product because I thought those would be entire adventure modules, as we're going to see on our next recording. But I suppose, yeah, they have a little bit of that at the end here that serves a similar purpose. I suppose, like, my thought is, aren't most books supposed to be like this? If you give me story hooks and setting info and crunchy bits, as this entire book does, that's the kit they're pointing to. But to me, that's a role-playing book.
I can explain.
Yeah.
First, a clarification. One of the major distinctions between World of Darkness versus Chronicles of Darkness is that with Changing the Lost, they specifically went for a toolbox approach towards everything.
Mm.
All of the entitlements that we've discussed, the extra quartz, the numerous written up antagonists, all of that is optional in a way that World of Darkness would not assume. In World of Darkness, if you write down these are members of the Incarnu for Vampire, or here's Dice, he's one of the most important changelings, those are taken as writ and stay throughout. Any new art is going to exist wholesale unless the book specifically says otherwise. Now, the reason they're calling out the SAS here is that partway into Chronicles of Darkness, they introduced the idea of these short form adventures. These adventures were originally known as the Storytelling Adventure System adventures. Later on, they changed them to be called Jumpstarts, which I think is still their preferred terminology, even after they moved on to products beyond Chronicles of Darkness. But the things that get somebody into the game immediately, like Yours to Keep is an excellent example of what they would call an SAS in here. Now, the two we're going to get at the back of this are different from any other SAS I've seen, and I'll explain that when we get there.
I think we're going to have to circle back to that next recording because to me it's a matter of approach in terms of how you use the tools that you're given in a book, how storytellers are encouraged to engage with the material and the world. But yeah. The intro also wisely points out here not to overuse Goblin Markets. They should be present and part of the freehold's life, but chronicles that spend large amounts of time there end up being about the market. And I'm personally all for that kind of chronicle, but I don't think that's what this book is pointing towards.
In my games, the Goblin Market has become a place that people love to revisit. It's not where they spend most of their time, but they probably spend more time at the Goblin Market than any other location in the game in aggregate.
Right on. So Chapter 1, To Market We Will Go. The opening bits here give some useful guidance. I liked the note that it's best not to use Goblin Markets to screw over your players, because obviously while a merchant may not lie directly about their wares, they're almost never telling the whole story. As well as, a Goblin Market is full of merchants, not genies, so there's no secret code for show me the stuff with no strings attached. And I know I said last time I'd like it if there were some non-cursed items in Lost, but those statements certainly reinforce the approach we've seen thus far towards Fey objects.
The idea of having something with no strings attached. Well, the good news is I do think we see that in Chapter 2, when we talk about gewgaws and ways you can buy things at the market. In the meantime, I just think that the advice on portraying etiquette in the Goblin Markets is one of the most defining passages in the book, and I love that we get more on that later.
Yeah, you should pretty much expect deceit. It's part of Fey nature. But, importantly, the etiquette of the market is separate from the laws of the market, which, at a minimum, will include no violence, you get what's advertised, honor your deals, and no refunds.
Hey, you can go to one that doesn't have these, but you know what you're getting into.
Yeah, and other markets might have additional codes and stuff. But the important piece is all of those sound like straightforward statements, and they are anything but straightforward. There are always little complications and whatnot.
The no refunds reminds me of something that I heard about in a, like, hey, how to play Vampire the Masquerade LARP. And one of the pieces of advice, which I think it's good if you're doing PvP and everybody's on note about that, but the idea of no refunds includes if I sell you something and it actually makes your life worse, you can't come back and expect me to refund it for you. I'm going to make that into a new deal.
Yeah.
And I may do that even knowing that you're going to do something bad for yourself. Out of character, storytellers, please be careful about doing something like that. You can really make things more complicated for your players than is entertaining for anybody at the table.
Yeah.
I love that not only do they give us these extra options, like extra laws, such as, hey, no cats allowed, but they then give an explanation for why that is, because they keep the true fae away. And they don't want to explain it to you because if you understood what it is, you would understand why it's important for them, and you're more likely to mess around with it if you're malicious. So good.
Yeah. So from the freehold perspective, markets are usually a mix of danger and opportunity that are tolerated, if nothing else. Some freeholds do try to impose their laws on them or ban them outright. Usually this ends up being a bad idea. Commerce will win. The different courts have their own sorts of attitudes, where Autumn Court will go looking for new magical stuff on market days. Winter is invested in watching what other people buy. Spring does a little shopping, a little selling, and summer breaks up human trafficking. Good on them.
I love that we get that, and we also get the perspective of a couple of the noble orders. If you're still having trouble putting Goblin Markets in perspective, just think about what your noble order would do or what your court might do. And I think you'll get some good guideposts out of this. Going back for a quick second, I love the idea that if you antagonize the market vendors, they might dump a bunch of their dangerous junk in your freehold, which makes me think of Roadside Picnic.
The vendors, though, to that point, are kind of a mixed bag, because they're not just hobgoblins, but there's also no small number of lost in the mix, possibly some exiled true fae, self-aware fetches, and weirder things. And they're all goblins in common parlance, but, they're all different kinds of people.
This is a great extension from the core book, which I think just said, yeah, they're all mysterious hobgoblins, and maybe there's a few other things in here. But this one outright says that you should expect some vampires and wizards at your stalls.
Yeah. And the actual nature of markets and how they came about is also a subject of debate. Did they arise because they fulfilled a need? Did wandering peddlers assemble them for mutual aid and defense? Are they some weird expression of Arcadia meant to lure and capture others? I kind of think it should be entirely mundane, or some kind of wild comment on a true fae who's the manifestation of commerce or something, and just no middle ground. But it is kind of immaterial to the actual functional stuff a market is there for.
That may be why I didn't care for that paragraph, even though I think it's great for somebody who wants to take those routes. I prefer the mundanity.
Yeah. So there's a bunch of useful guidance for storytellers here. Suggestions include decide the character and origin of your market, what makes it unique, but also keep it strange. There are suggestions like if there are supernaturals who end up as vendors, like witches and vampires, they might be those who were shunned by their communities for being too involved in human affairs or whatever. There's the important note that vendors hold all the cards in an interaction, except that they can't force someone to buy a thing. So let that kind of color your interpretation of how they behave. Location also matters. The market should be isolated but accessible, provided you know how to get there, which can be harder than a player assumes. And there is also a market familiarity merit, so that you'll know where to find and navigate.
I love the market familiarity merit, and I think they should excise the line that says non-changelings may not purchase this merit. Anybody should be able to have market familiarity, for better or worse.
Yeah.
It goes well with one of the most urban fantasy things I've ever red, a pure mechanic, you can find your local goblin market with an intelligence plus streetwise roll without having any other contract or trait to inform your ability to find that. Isn't that wonderful?
And it raises the question, if you're playing like a Mortals game or something, and you're just asking around, where can I get X? And it turns out a Goblin Market is the only answer. Like, that would be a great way to lead Mortals into a Changeling session or arc in their game. Because it's like, you end up in this weird back alley with a bunch of weird looking characters, and you're not quite sure what's going on. And that opens up a whole new kind of adventure.
Yes, it does.
Storytellers, take note. And also, the information that you develop as part of your market, like having the players discover that and trying to get there and enter and get past all the layers of security and everything, that's an entire session on its own that can be just as fun and engaging as the actual market space. And the way that a player engages with the market can have an impact on their social status in the freehold, how other changelings perceive them. If you want the market to be a more consistent part of freehold life, spark a story by having the known routes or entrances threatened by something. That's one of the suggestions here. I like that a lot because it gives you a lot of flexibility in determining the role that this space plays within the game. I feel like we don't actually see a lot of other stuff like that with respect to freeholds.
They do have that section in the core book about how you can have like a communal safe space that Changeling said of like these signs of protection. So they do exist, but I don't think any of them have as strong a presence as the Goblin Markets.
Yeah.
Goblin Markets get their own book. The Changeling safe places do not. There is no Hollows book, and now I suddenly wish that there was.
Or commons too is the other one. That's like, yeah, commons are defined by their nothingness. They're just this common denominator space.
You got my mind reeling when you mentioned the idea of making a whole adventure session out of it, because that would be the path towards a goblin market would be the kind of thing that a privateer or one of the true fae might hang out at, waiting to pick you up, because sure, they can't touch you if you're on the market grounds, but if there's one passageway that everybody has to go through, that's a real danger.
Yep. A bit more on security here. There are usually guards at the entrance and patrolling around the market space. Many vendors retain their own, be they hedge beasts or hobs or lost. Some vendors are happy to use traps or magic to defend their wares, and some markets even demand that buyers swear a pledge to abide by the peace. Which maybe, to your point about the others, feeds into the next section about risks. Capture is one of the big ones, whether that's by a hobgoblin or by the gentry. Technically, it's against market law, but changelings get a good price in fairy, so...
I had an issue with the capture one. Not that I think that wouldn't happen, but because I think everybody has to swear a pledge on a token from the goblin market, that it would prevent people from doing that. Or it would immediately punish them for doing that, I mean to say.
I think they say that, like, yeah, more prudent merchants may try to capture the target outside market walls. So kind of what you were pointing to, lurking outside is the best place or the riskiest place for that. For storytellers less into having trafficking as part of their chronicle, etiquette blunders are also a big risk if you don't know all the rules of a market, and fatal offenses might include killing a vendor, destroying a stall, or sabotaging the market overall. They have the arcane market justice ritual.
Does that ritual seem familiar to you? I swear that I've heard of something.
So what I think of is a particular episode of the show Carnival where it's like carny justice. But I think it's kind of a trope where pick a number and they'll put a bullet in the gun and spin the chamber and then fire that many shots.
Okay.
I mean, that might be very much fictional, but I don't hang out with enough carnival folks to know.
We even get a section about carnival later on here. Oh,
Yes.
coming up very quickly, because we're at market types.
Yeah, so this is like the last section before the examples. The basic considerations are whether your market is in the mundane world or in the hedge, and whether it's nomadic or stationary. In the former pairing, the hedge offers more room to sprawl out, and it's more convenient for the less human merchants, but has the risk of roving gentry and hedge beasts. And then nomadic versus stationary. Stationary markets don't need to confine themselves to spaces that can be pulled up at a moment's notice, but tend to leave more trace of their presence. I think I'd probably go in general for like mobile hedge. That would be my preference.
The one I use in my game is a fixed location in the Hedge. It's
Mm.
the Phoenix Convention Center, and if you go there after hours or through a specific way, you can wind up in a constantly live convention center. I also love the idea in the side section the market will be computerized, which is about rumors that maybe there's some digital equivalent of the Goblin Market. And Puka, I love the idea of Goblin Market eBay.
I'll have to call it something else though. EHOB.
I feel like they cover this in second edition because they go on a whole thing about hopping into the internet equivalent part of the Hedge. It's going to be a trip when we get there. Oh, side note, all of the art in this book is fantastic. There's few, if any, misses, including
Oh,
this
true.
cool spider person we get who's got like a canteen, a football, and several other things carried up in webs. And is that a hookah? Is it smoking a hookah? I think it is.
Probably. I mean, that's what oversized crawly things do. In any case,
Oh
we
my.
end with 4 example markets here. We have the Midsummer Night's Sideshow, a mobile mortal side market that follows a year-long circuit and has a shabby traveling carnival vibe. The Hacienda, a fixed mortal side market taking place in an abandoned mansion every 9 days. The Churchyard, a fixed hedge market that appears on the other side of a cemetery during a crescent moon, and the Spider Bazaar, a mobile hedge market that is heavily arachnid-themed and staffed. And I think the Midsummer Night's Sideshow is my fave out of these 4.
They're all fantastic.
Yeah.
Overall, I'm a big fan of the first chapter. It's a little repetitive in the text itself, but revelatory when it comes to understanding what a goblin market looks like, how people behave or should behave, and what the role of a goblin market in the story is. I consider it indispensable if you're going to have a goblin market session.
Yeah. It felt to me like maybe it was a little bit thin at points, but I supposed by this point in the line. So when they say something like, oh, some markets require pledges or some vendors use hedge beasts, they can reasonably expect that storytellers and players will know how to handle those concepts on their own. So, like, more information about what those look like or examples for that wasn't really necessary. So, yeah, I think it was tight. And then we get to chapter 2, buying and selling, the meat of the book. Before we actually get to the buying and selling, we get right into talking about the merchandise. So,
Aw, yeah.
for which there are, is it 8 categories total? 8 or 9. Each one has a mix of explanations and examples and occasional mechanical bits for each. So, we start with hedge spun items, clothing or otherwise. These are very common, generally inexpensive, although one still ought to haggle. One always should haggle at the Goblin Market. And they're pretty ordinary except for the fantastic substances they're made of.
I am big into style and fashion when it's part of a TTRPG. I'm the person who takes personal hygiene and style in Cyberpunk Red. So, yes, I would absolutely buy headspun equipment for my characters. I don't care whether it does anything special. It's cool.
Like that scarf woven from comfortable, non hazardous living flame.
Exactly. This is just like build your own voil from Dreaming.
There you go. Next are goblin contracts, which obviously are also pretty common here. They cost experience points, naturally, but narratively, the Lost might literally sign a contract, or swallow an oddment containing it, trade a drop of blood or some hair. Lots of options for how to show that scene.
It seemed kind of unnecessary to me to how they broke it down, but that's fine.
Yeah. Next are tokens, in which goblin markets do a brisk business, because they're regularly found and traded by the hobs who dwell in the hedge. We're going to get to like the price stuff in a second, but they cost their rating in dots. Here's where we also get 0 dot tokens called gewgaws that have no mechanical effect, but they're fun and flavorful. Any favorites from this list of examples?
Oh, Oh yes. I love the idea that there are some things that a goblin merchant will put in their wares, not because it's actually useful, but because it's just so weird that they know somebody's going to buy it eventually. And that person who buys it is probably going to be me. Gewgaws are a fantastic addition onto that. Zero dots, oh my goodness, yes. You can just have even more weird stuff for your character. For my favorites, I think the Pulp magazine is cute because there's always a new experience if you
Mhm.
reread it and find the details that have changed. And the 1950s vinyl record that plays a jazz song in my own voice, that's so fascinating. I need to hear it. And then I think I would be horribly embarrassed and want to destroy it immediately. That one experience would be fantastic. Oh, and if you want to troll people, I'm a big fan of the paintbrush and the goad. So the paintbrush literally only paints in red, which is pretty fun for a prank. And the elephant goad is something you place underneath somebody's bed while they sleep, and it makes white elephants appear.
The other thing too is, well, two other things is that if you can convince players that these items are somehow much more important to the story than they actually are, that can be great fun. But then also if players can creatively think of ways to use them. So like one is a walnut that when opened releases a live dragonfly. Surely a creative player can think of a moment to use that as a distraction for something.
Yeah.
So technically they don't have a bonus, but they could.
And isn't that the essence of Changeling?
I think that's the essence of role playing, finding creative solutions. Next up, goblin fruits, which might be the most common items in the market. There are dedicated stalls, but a lot of vendors just have them to sweeten the other deals that they make. The new ones that we get here include the intoxicating cocorange, the slightly trippy coral scalp, which I think they're just describing a microdose, and then the foul to eat but socially enhancing dactyl fruit.
I love all of these, particularly the Cocorange just being booze.
Cocorange.
Incidentally, the little benefits kind of remind me of the stuff from Cypher system. How there's like this little like one-use artifacts you can pick up and you're meant to trade out.
We should probably have a warning for the next bit and maybe just go through it quickly. So this is servants, pets, and slaves. Obviously, check in with your players before you touch the latter of these, especially because there is an actual merit for such. The description suggests using retainer for sentient hedge beast, pets, and bound hobgoblins and whatnot. And I'm thinking, yeah, just use that. It's good that they point out any trafficking is a major clarity break, but players could also, I guess, be into a story of liberation, but I don't think we really need new mechanical depth to tell that kind of story, and this is very much a handle with care kind of situation.
And one that I think they mess up.
It's not great. Skip the merit. That's probably the biggest piece.
The whole concept of dealing with enslavement is something that is part of changing the lost, but it needs a proper discussion if you're going to get deep into it like this.
Yeah.
And they did not make that part of this 50-page book. So talking about this from the perspective of people who are being enslaved one way or the other might be an interesting subject to handle, but it requires more space and care than they give here. And frankly, this has very little perspective, if any, from that of people who are being put through this, which I think is a huge miss.
Mm.
Maybe they would have had room in a book about privateers where they would go on about what is it like to be trapped in that and how do you avoid it or escape it and deal with people who do that. But this is a miss.
I'll point out we're also going to circle back to that question at the end.
Oh, unrelated to all that, I don't think that the fairy pets make sense as a retainer. It's about having somebody who will do whatever you ask with a little exception and they don't need pools. I think that having literal animals is just a little different.
Ah,
A fey pet mirror is what I'm saying we deserved for your cool, like, fire cat.
I can get behind that. I just want a cat with thumbs. Next bucket of merchandise are the vices, which I think might be my favorite, or one of my two favorites. So you can
Yes.
have vice merchants who are well stocked with tailor-made items for any character's vice. And we get several examples for each of the like the actual mechanical vices on the character sheet. My favorite, I think, is Greed getting a goblin executive toy because it makes me think of a Newton's cradle that just causes massive chains of misfortune when you set it going.
So my absolute favorite is the punching bag that gives a satisfying whimper when you strike it. That is, all these are vivid images, but that one stuck with me even after putting the book aside for a long time. On a tangent, though, the Book of Curious Pornography may have inspired one of my Goblin Market NPCs, and I'm no longer sure about that. But
Oh,
Curious Pornography, I wonder what they had in mind.
oh my. Next up, transformations. These are fairly open-ended. There is some advice for how to price them for players, with additional Kith blessings being the most common. They give some callbacks to winter masks and rites of spring for that. Apparently, regaining fertility is also popular, but any children born from a lost, thanks to this exchange, tend to have a fey curse on them. We also get here the Goblin Midwife Goblin contract that lets a lost manage such a bargain as an intermediary.
I have thoughts on both transformations in general and the fertility specifically.
Me too, and they're quite different from each other. Well, I mean, yeah, you go first.
Okay. Transformations, whenever I see that in a game, I immediately look for the gender affirmation power, and I'm actually surprised that there isn't anything in here about even as general as upgrading your looks. The closest we get is one dot cosmetic change the color of your hair. It has come up in my games, and I have the price based upon how valuable it is to the character
Hmm.
as part of the twisted nature of the hedge. If a person is already pretty satisfied with their existence, then any kind of change like that might be easy to pull off. Or, like in my game, it took a whole quest for a character to find gender affirmation magic. I just wish they'd had that in here. For fertility, this just feels mean spirited rather than fey. I know that most Fae have roadblocks towards having kids, but this just really doubles down on fertility. Like, this is the one issue under transformation that they chose to focus on and just kind of made it worse. This just feels like a very specific person's take, which I grant you gender affirmation is as well, but I don't like their approach on the fertility subject.
Yeah, I mean, transformations, I think you could do an entire chapter just on all the permutations of that.
Hell
Um,
yeah.
I don't necessarily blame them for kind of making it as minimal as they could get away with. But yeah, the kind of zooming in on fertility, if someone wants to play that game, then more power to them. I don't find it particularly appealing as like a theme or subject matter. And once you start introducing it, that really is the entire game is going to become about this and probably deserves just as much content warnings as anything else really heavy. Like you said before, it's not really handled very deeply or delicately because this is such a short book and it certainly doesn't get the time and attention it probably deserves. But if you're into it and you find merit in it, then good on you.
Literal merit.
Yes. The last bit, and this is my other favorite bucket, are secondhand destinies, where you
Hey, we're on the same page. Heck
we are
yeah.
on the same page. It's page 26. um, so you appropriate bits of someone else's fate, usually the deceased, but I think it would be more interesting to combine it with those hobgoblins and dancers in the dusk who like eat away your fate so you can get a new one. I like to think of them gnawing away someone's destiny and then going and dropping it off at the market for someone else to buy. Anyway, out of this, you can get Goblin Merits, which are half cost, but take 1 glamour to activate once per chapter and don't get 10 again. So that can be whatever kind of merit you nom from somebody else's life story. There's also this merit of secondhand skills where you can channel someone else's skills.
The deceased business executive doesn't have any more use for those allies or contacts or their dots of resources. Why shouldn't you put it to use?
Yeah.
The secondhand skills part, though, I still love it. I just have to observe that the whole idea of merits or skills that you can just slot into your body feels very much like the enhancers from Shadowrun and other cyberpunk games.
Dig it. So after all of that, we have What Have You Got, which is more of a system than merchandise. If you want to get really freeform and improvisational with your players, and they just want to go from stall to stall looking for random things, this is where you can introduce plot hooks. I do like the idea that it's an opportunity to rearrange someone's character sheet with the player's permission, please. Introduce legendary tokens. There's a bunch of options here for weird objects you can find.
I loved all of these plot hooks. I love the idea of goblin bounties as a plot hook, and I would use several of these. I think that these are all wonderful plot hook in a single paragraph
Mhm.
objects.
So then we transition fully into talking about systems. First, we have this brief table that rates item value from 1 to 5, or really from 0 to 5 plus. And note that an item's dot rating doesn't always correspond to its capital V value. So, for example, a 2 dot hedge spun item or goblin contract only has a value of 1. Just as an aside here, the value chart includes guides, like through the hedge or through the market. And I just think, why didn't they have services in the list of merchandise rather than servants and slaves?
Oh, that's
It
a
would have
wonderful
been
idea.
so much better.
I think I know what it is. That I think maybe at some point they intended to have that as part of services, and then they just
Mhm.
had servants in there and forgot about it. Because when they describe servants in that section, they kind of go two ways on it. One, they make it very clear that this person who you are, I think, enslaving because they have to help you out with something.
Yeah.
But at the same time, the way they describe it makes me feel more like they were meant to be bodyguards or guides that you could purchase their services from them and they would do it.
Mhm.
It's confusing, but yes, to your point, the idea of standalone services that is freed of the servants, slaves, and pets thing would be much better.
Yeah. So then we have price. Money is rarely accepted at the Goblin Market, so there are other options, each of which gets its own little conversion table here. Again, 1 to 5 or 0 to 5 plus. There are abstractions like memories or songs, curiosities, which are mundane artifacts with something quirky, living merchandise, clarity break, or experience points. This is highly dependent on what you're buying, but generally you spend XP as though you are buying skills.
That section brings to mind the fact that because experience points are explicitly their own section, you could buy things that normally require experience expenditures if you have the right thing to trade. And I like that, but what do you think about that, Puka?
Well, I think I'm fine with that. The question that I would have in turn is what does this do to the pre existing conversion rates that we get? So, like, could you potentially get yourself a discount on a contract by spending less than whatever the experience points, something, something? I don't know if there's like a flow chart we can put together to see how that works, but
So the idea would be that for contracts specifically, you're probably going to wind up with a goblin contract version of the power that you want,
right.
which would explain why you would still need to buy it and that would cost less. But for something like a powerful token, I just don't think that there is an experience cost you would assign to it, at least by this book's standards. Do you think that's something they overlooked?
No, not necessarily. It's just a situation I could envision arising, and there's not exactly guidance on how to deal with it. But I mean, it's probably so rare. I mean, if I were in a Goblin Market game, I wouldn't be focused on how can I get like 2 points off of my purchase for whatever.
In my own game, so many people go there just because they want a really fancy dress and nobody makes it like a goblin tailor.
Yeah. There's a good sidebar on how to explain abstractions a little bit better.
Oh, I love that
It
sidebar.
is
It's so
nice.
useful.
And you can roll intelligence plus occult to identify curiosities, roll wits plus investigation to apprise the price of a good, things like that. There's also kind of mention of pledges being part of the bargains, but that's actually not really developed much in this chapter.
Hmm. I hadn't noticed that part. What I did notice is that the top level curiosities. Okay, we start as low as one dot. Strange handcrafted music box, a copy of Peter Pan in which a child sketches his nightmares, a tortilla on which there is an image of the Virgin Mary. Ah, cute, quirky, fun, love it. Level 6 plus. Excalibur, Odysseus' bow, the Holy Grail, a pearl from a dragon's forehead. I
Yeah.
love this. Absolutely
Well,
love this.
I love it too, but they're also supposed to be things that don't really have, you know.
I guess having Excalibur at my side probably has more than sentimental
Like,
value.
what would you possibly trade that for? That's the question. So
Oh,
there are complications to purchasing. One can haggle, but different vendors are interested in different things. Good deals are as rare as hen's teeth, which you can actually surely buy at the market. And prices can shift quickly in the context of a creatively role-played negotiation. I wanted to just read the example they give on page 32 because I think it's a good little overview of what this might look like. So it says, Hannah, an Autumn Court Darkling, has found an unusual book that prophesies the owner's future among the wares of a goblin merchant. The book is a 3-dot token and thus is value 3. Beeslebor, the hob merchant, tells Hannah that it can be hers for the low, low price of her doctorate education, price 4. Hannah chuckles, offering instead the shriveled claw of a werewolf, price 2, that she's been holding on to for a rainy day. The pair haggle over the cost. Hannah reaches 4 successes first, and that's on a roll of cutting a deal roll, which is in the World of Darkness rulebook, page 82, apparently. Hannah reaches 4 successes first, but only barely. She's able to get the item for just less than the halfway point between their offers, which happens to be just less than the value. A good, though hardly great deal. The storyteller settles on the cost being 2 price 2 items. Hannah gets the book for the werewolf's claw and a bag of spiders that died of fright.
I love the bag of spiders that died of fright.
Yeah. So it's a system, and I know I've kind of said, oh, I don't like over mechanization, but I think I'd be at a disadvantage in kind of role playing through haggling. So having a system to rely on actually helps me out a lot.
Cutting a deal, by the way, is manipulation plus persuasion plus equipment versus manipulation plus persuasion plus equipment. It is extended and contested, requiring 3 to 10 plus successes, each will representing an hour of negotiation.
What equipment? Is it like holding a gun to get a better deal? Sheesh.
Oh my god. Okay. Well, looking at the example on page 82, the New World of Darkness, it says that neither of these characters have any equipment to adjust it. So your guess is as good as mine because the rulebook couldn't figure it out.
That's what I'm going to go with. Here's my knife. I'm going to hold it to your neck to get +3 on this negotiation. Anyway.
That is part of their social system in the second edition of the game. And yeah, if you pull out a gun or have some badge from impressing somebody at the market over things like this, maybe that gives you a bonus. But any of the lesser ones probably get some sort of bonus.
We'd also have the market sense merit here, which gives you +3 to sniff out good deals and resist any powers that would interfere with your perception of the fairness. So maybe that would help too.
Heck yeah, 1 dot.
So we get some notes on playing a vendor, which I think might be easier than playing a customer. There's the seller's game section that demands vendors follow the market's rules and regularly produce and sell merchandise. You have a trial period to prove yourself a valuable member of the market community, find a sponsor, and this applies to players who want to get in on the action.
Yes, this is a full 2 pages about
Yeah.
how to become a seller. It's complex. If you want that in your game, it's going to be fun.
You get merits out of it. You can first get the Goblin Merchant merit. Once you work that up to 3 dots, you can acquire the Market Stall merit, where you establish yourself more permanently. And once you've been doing a brisk business in your wares, your business is really humming along, you can get the Wholesale Wares merit and get some vendor-only discounts. But the book also points out being a vendor isn't necessarily less dangerous than being a customer, and indeed, there are some additional dangers, from straining your social ties to other lost to dealing with threatening customers in exchange for the access that you get.
This is the most exciting Atelier RPG that I've heard of in my life.
Perfect. So I was trying to pinpoint what I found refreshing about this chapter, and I think it's like the pace of the writing, because there were very few points when I was asking, well, what about this? Can we get more info about that? And there's little that I would add which wouldn't just be elaboration. The only things that I can like really think of would be notes on how pledges kind of factor into bargains more, maybe having those guides or other services. And I think the haggling interaction, I would have maybe liked to see a full interaction from start to finish, from entering the market to leaving the market. But it's a tight chapter. It's dense with crunch that's still flavorful.
I feel the same. The stuff about slaves is obviously a miss and shouldn't have been in this book, but everything else is very cool.
Yeah. And I have to wonder, given what we said last time about the kind of trying to hit a page count feeling for some of those other books, I wonder if having this be an online supplement gave them freedom to just kind of say what needed to be said clearly and succinctly and not pad anything.
It is repetitive yet, but
Not nearly as much.
yeah.
So then we move on to chapter 3, Market Stories.
Oh boy.
The intro here points out that there is an almost infinite variety of possibilities for characters to explore in a market, and again, you can introduce almost any plot hook from random chance adventures to moral quandaries. That said, this chapter primarily consists of a handful of pre-made storytellers' characters that you can drop into your market scene or elsewhere, divided between employees, merchants, and shoppers. You can adjust them as necessary to meet the demands of the story. There are several. Shall we skim through?
I only have thoughts on the last one, so yeah, take the...
All right, here we go. Blunderboars. These are your basic brutish hobgoblin market guards that are even uglier and baser, their words, than ogres. Mr. Pinch, an autumn chatelaine, sort of the lost version of the overbearing retail employee who's like, "Can I help you?" And thralls, who are basically glamour animated zombies who do grunt work. There is a suggestion that they're individuals so damaged by the thorns that they've basically lost their sentience. I'm not sure this is any better than the slave merit, but maybe it offers story potential.
I can see the story potential in it in coming to...
Certainly rescue. Rescue is an option.
Yeah.
But yeah. Anyway, the vendors. We have Zecher Mercy, an ancient and businesslike hobgoblin who's at the heart of the market memory trade. Widow Mactan, a spidery, Slua-like, twisted fey godmother who distributes tainted problem-solving. Estevan, a spring court rot-eater. This is a deep-cut kith from Winter Masks of the beast-seeming. He has a hyena-ish aspect, and he's an opportunist rag and bone man supreme. We also have 2 example shoppers, Liza Jane, a polite and helpful winter mannequin searching the markets for her lost heart, and Eric Long, an unassuming, self-aware fetch seeking to become properly human.
His story is so sad.
Well, yeah, Eric Long, I know it's probably a popular hook for any fetch character, but I still like it when it comes up. I think it's really compelling. I like it much more than Liza Jane, where I'm just thinking, oh, another missing heart hook? How many lost are missing their heart at this point? But yeah, my favorite is Zecher Mercy, the memory broker. Cool stuff.
Shall we talk about the goblin markets themselves? Sorry, the sample scenarios?
Yeah, 2 sample scenarios. Content warning for the first one?
Yeah, I don't like this one. So the first one is called To Serve the Market. And your characters have something that they want. The goblin marketeer that you want them from is not going to give it to you for anything except for one specific thing: your servitude for a full season. And content warning for enslavement, because by default, you cannot leave for the entirety of it, and your character can get pulled into doing anything, including the slave trade. Now, diegetically, the point of this scene is that that's a terrible thing, and you're trying to negotiate him down. But 2 things. One is that there should have been a content warning that says, hey, if you don't want this part in your game, change the scenario. Here's how else that might work. And 2, even if you negotiate out all of the icky parts, this still keeps the character enslaved for a full season. And yeah, you can flip it between your motley mates, but somebody's just going to be out of action. I don't see a good reason to use this in a game. It's a miss for me. I'm sad.
It claims that it can give characters insight into the workings of a market, but the exchange of having a pretty major derailment in a character's story. It's like you can find other ways to introduce them to a market.
Their dot ratings seem weird too. Why is this a physical 3 scenario?
I guess he just got a lot of boxes to move. I don't know. The second one is Harsh Accusations, in which a wily shopkeep frames the characters for theft. Characters can try to clear their names or simply escape. There are complications like, have they stolen from this market before? Do they have an alibi? Consequences might be that they are unlikely to go unnoticed in this market again, which might be good for an ongoing space that's associated with the freehold. Much more usable, I would say.
Yeah, it feels thin, but if you
Yeah.
can pull stuff from the rest of this chapter to fill it in, I think you're good. I'm a little spoiled by the SASs that I've been reading as the standalone because they are entire scenarios that break this down
Well,
into
right.
individual things.
Because that's what I think of when I thought of SAS, and these are thin, as you said. So you can't really build much of a story out of the second one for sure.
The actions they give don't really change much this. Honestly, I think they could have just included this in the laundry list of actions your characters can take in
Mm-hmm.
general. That's a thing. They didn't need to create these scenarios around it.
There are
So,
these cute little action cards at the end, though. I like these.
yeah. I won't begrudge someone who looks at this and gets inspired by it. That's definitely the point. It just doesn't seem to do anything for you and me specifically.
Yeah, but that's because we're used to doing elaborate over planning for games, probably. So this chapter, character descriptions are overall shorter than the ones we usually get, I think.
Yeah.
And there are contracts and whatnot in the mix, but I don't think any of these characters have kind of bespoke Fey aspects that need explanation.
I wish that they had included like a master of the market, like whoever organizes it,
Mm.
which may not be a thing for all of them, but seems like it'd be a thing at some changeling goblin markets.
The Morphean of Commerce.
Where does the term goblin market even come from? I just realized I have no idea where that
From
term was
the
coined.
poem, from the Christina Rossetti
Really?
poem.
Oh,
I'll send it. I'll post it in the show notes and it'll be available.
thank you.
So overall, a solid book. I confess, a maximalist writer and in turn a maximalist reader, so I wouldn't have minded a longer book with more bells and whistles, but it is nice to see a text that's streamlined down to its most important functional parts. I do think there's enough variety and depth to sustain the idea of a market through multiple stories, but not so much that you get bogged down. I'm glad that even though there was like a system around haggling, there wasn't an entirely new mini game because we didn't need one. I'm glad that each court only got a few lines on how they engage with markets, and that each bucket of merchandise didn't get like 10 fully detailed example items like we saw in last book. This very much felt like a skeleton on which storytellers have a lot of freedom to add on however much they want, which was correct for this, I feel. But that's me.
I'm of a similar mind. I loved almost every part about this book, and the parts I didn't, I have called out.
Mhm.
I have used this book as a reference for several of my games, and it's a great well to dip back into anytime you are feeling stuck or you want to introduce a new element to the Goblin Market, or even a campaign as a whole. Excellent book.
Yeah. And with that, we come to the end.
What are we reading next time?
Next up will be The Fearmaker's Promise, a compilation of 2 full SAS modules and some ready-made characters. Prepare yourselves. But in the meantime, or if you have questions and comments for that upcoming episode, you can get in touch with us on various social outlets. These include Discord at discord.me/CTP, sending us an email at podcast@changelingthepodcast.com, reach out to us on Facebook or YouTube under Changeling the Podcast, and send us a toot on Mastodon at changelingpod@dice.camp. You're also welcome to sign up for our Patreon and support our show at www.patreon.com/changelingthepodcast. Links to all of these will be in the show notes to this episode. Once again, I have been Puka.
And I remind you, no refunds. I've been Fetch.
Yeah, save your receipts. May the buyer beware. And never, ever ask to speak to the manager. A goblin cannot survive on fruit alone, so much as we hear about those delights, there are undoubtedly other foodstuffs available at your standard goblin market. The elderly bird woman who only speaks in muffled shrieks sells hedge insects of all sorts roasted on skewers from her rusting wheelbarrow. Around small tables fashioned from coils of mistletoe, you can discuss the finer points of contracts while sipping shade-grown goblin coffee outside the gaslit cafe. Really, all coffee in the hedge is shade-grown. And if you're hankering for something more substantial, Jimmy Two-Toes hawks piles of emotion-steeped meat from his tray. You can buy more juicy slices at the delicatessen tucked in the crooked alley, so long as you swear a pledge never to ask where they came from. Of course, if you're looking for a place to spend well or ill-earned coin, you're also welcome to contribute to our Patreon to help keep things running at www.patreon.com/changelingthepodcast. Those who contribute get the weekly circular of market coupons and a shout-out at the end of each episode like so. Bad Company, Sig Lawson Jr., Derek, Dorcadus, Elris, Henry Kraft, Eobol, Oreo, Raskaboos, Sandchicker, Sija, The Crew of Erebus, and Were Buffalo. Many thanks to them. We also welcome reviews on the podcast listening platform of your greatest convenience, and do tell your friends and haggling rivals about our show. Until next time, remember that nothing is refundable and everything must go as you keep on dreaming.